This conference will now be recorded.
So, good morning and good evening once again. Um so, in yesterday's demo session, we have discussed about what is performance testing and the LoadRunner architecture, and then we have seen a small example of how to record and replay the script in Vusion, and then we have discussed about the course content, and then we have discussed about we have addressed the questions you had, right? So in today's session, we will discuss about the types of performance testing. Okay, so I do have the slides for the types of performance testing, but however, I prefer to discuss the same, on the notepad here. Okay, and anyhow, later on, I will be sharing those slides as well. Okay, so according to you, what was the definition in simple terms? Okay, what was the definition of what's the definition of performance testing? So what is that performance tester? Uh, you know, uh, Main focus. So the performance tester primary focus will be to analyze how fast is the application responding, isn't it? So can we say something like this? Checking the performance of an application, checking the performance of an application. But then if you test or if you check the performance of an application with only one user, is that called as the performance testing? No, we have to apply some load. Okay, we have to apply some load. So you can say by applying load. What do you mean by load here? Load means some number of users. Okay, let's say 50 users, 100 users, 150 users, 200 users. So when 200 users are, just an example, when 200 users are accessing the application at the same point of time, okay, how the application is responding? Probably they might be performing different actions, but still they are active on the application, right? They're actively performing some actions. Okay, uh, so checking the performance of an application by applying load, okay, you can call it as a performance testing. So if you don't say load, or if you don't use this term load, it doesn't give a proper meaning for that, because with one user, if you test or if you check the performance, it's not called as performance testing. Okay, no, performance testing is measured in terms of speed, stability, and scalability. Okay, so if you see few years ago, the performance testing was more focused in terms of or measured in terms of speed, like how fast it is responding. Okay, how fast the user is able to navigate from one page to another page, and so on. Nowadays, these terms stability and scalability also are important. We'll discuss like what is this stability, what is this scalability, to which type of testing these terms are related to. Okay, so here we'll discuss about types of performance testing, and then while discussing, I'll relate the term speed, stability, and scalability. Okay, types of performance testing. Okay, so the first type of performance testing, what we do is load test. Okay, first I'll list out the types of tests, and then we can uh, discuss in detail about each one of them. So stress test, endurance test, sorry. And then you have something called scalability test. Okay. Then you have volume test. Then you have failover test, which is gaining more importance in recent times. Okay. And then you have some other also like smoke test, what you call, uh, those things are not that important. These are the ones, okay, which we'll have to understand. So today we will discuss about the first five. The last one we will have to discuss tomorrow because there is some dependency. Okay, so if you have to understand this type of test, this test, failover test, you have to understand some terms called server. What is a server? What is application server? Okay, and all those things. So then only you can understand how to perform this failover test and what is this failover test all about. So we'll park this for tomorrow. Okay, these five we'll try to understand today. So the first thing is load testing. The very first thing is load test. Okay, so load testing is all about checking the speed of the application. It's more likely how fast the application is responding. Okay, whether the pages are loading slow or not. Okay, how the response times are coming. How the response times are coming. Okay, so this term speed is related to the load test. Okay, this speed, the term speed here relates to the load test. Okay, so it is all about checking the speed of the application, speed of the application. Okay, by, or you can say under some expected load. Expected load means the amount of load that we have to test. Amount of load, the number of users that we have to test. See, load means number of users. Load means number of users. Now, who will give this number of users to us? Okay, I will run the load test, okay, with some number of users. But who will give the number of users to us? We cannot simply define the number of users on our own, right? So, who is going to give the input, or who will provide the input for us to the performance team? So, it will be the client or the application team or the business analyst. Okay, so it could be client or app team. App team means application team. Application team means the development team. Okay, or the BA, the business analyst. Okay, the business analyst. So these guys will provide, okay, will provide the input to us. What do you mean by input? Input means the load volumes, like with how many users we have to test, how many iterations we have to run, and all those things. I'll tell you what is iteration and all later. But for time being, let's say the input means load volumes. Okay, so for example, 500 users. Okay, for example, 500 users. Okay, now what is one more important point as part of load test is it will be executed for 1 hour. So load test will be executed for 1 hour. Okay, that means when you kickstart the load test, it will have to it will have to run for 1 hour at least. Okay, so by default it will be 1 hour. I mean, if you want to execute anything beyond that, it will be called as a different type of test again. So you can stick to 1 hour load test. Okay, now here what is that we are going to verify? Main thing, the first thing we will be verifying is the response times. First thing that to be verified is response times. Okay, so yesterday we discussed. So if you click a link or if you click a button on any page, on any UI page, the the industry standard response time is 2 seconds. That means if you click a button or if you click a link, you should get the response back in 2 seconds. Okay, so in some projects it will be 3 seconds or 5 seconds also. Okay, it depends on the project, but mostly it will be 2 seconds. In rare cases, if the application architecture maybe is if it is little bit complex from the development perspective or from the overall project perspective, they might be okay with the response time of 2 seconds or 3 seconds also. Sorry, 3 seconds or 5 seconds also. Okay. Uh, Now that response time agreement of 3 seconds or 2 seconds, that we call it as SLA. SLA means service level agreement. Service level agreement. That means client will tell before itself that all the transaction response times should be 2 seconds or 3 seconds, something like that. Yesterday we have seen the sequence of steps, right? For example, if it's a bank application, uh, for example, if it's a bank application, for the scenario, for the script transfer money, what are the steps we understood? Let's say the script is transfer money. Okay, let's assume it's a bank application. The script is transfer money. The first step is launch. Then second step is login. Let's say launching the application, then log into the application. Okay, then you have select or you can say navigate to your account, right? Navigate to your account after login. Might be you will have multiple accounts there. So select a beneficiary. Select a beneficiary. Then you can enter amount and let's say click transfer. And then probably you might log out. These are the possible steps, right? So each one of these step, okay, each one of these action we can relate to the term transaction in our script. Okay, launch is one transaction, login is one transaction, navigate to your account is one transaction, selecting a beneficiary is one transaction, transferring the money is one transaction, log out is one transaction. So this service level agreement, whatever we are discussing here, this will be applicable to all the transactions. Okay, this will be applicable to all the transactions. Okay, so the client can say that all the transactions response time should not exceed 2 seconds. So launch should not exceed 2 seconds, login should not exceed 2 seconds, like that. In some cases, in some cases the client can tell that uh, click transfer or transferring money can max take 3 seconds, but all others can have to be done within 2 seconds. So that means each transaction can have a separate SLA also, like this. Okay, each transaction also can have a separate SLA. It's called a service level agreement. That means it's an agreement between the client and the development team. The client will tell the development team that, hey, when you are developing the application, so whatever the action that the user will perform, it has to be fulfilled, okay, in 2 seconds only, within 2 to 3 seconds only, whatever it is. Okay, so that's the agreement. Okay, now what is one more term here is, uh, see, whenever we do performance testing, what do we identify? Issues, right? That in performance testing terminology, we call it as we call it as bottleneck. Okay, we call it as bottleneck. Okay, we cannot directly call it as an issue. So whenever you are working in a performance testing project, you hear this term frequently, which is called as bottleneck. That means some kind of performance issue. Okay, okay. So this is about load test. Okay, so what are we doing here? We are checking the speed of the application. Okay, when we are running a load test, or after the load test is done, so we will be checking the speed of the application. Okay, and load means number of users. Who will provide? Client or application team or BA business analyst will provide the input. Load test will be executed for 1 hour. First thing to be verified is response times only. Okay, and then the response times will be related to the SLA. SLA means service level agreement. Okay, it can be 2 seconds as per the industry standard. Okay, then depending on the complexity, it can be like 3 seconds or 5 seconds also. Okay, as per the project need. So this is about the load test. This is the first type of test that we do. Okay, So basically, whenever you are developing all the scripts, right? Whenever you are working in a performance testing project, right? This is the first major test that we will run. See, there is something called smoke test again, but that is to ensure whether the scripts are working fine and all those things. That's a different thing. But from the performance testing perspective, this is the first test that we will be running. So if this test is a failure, you cannot proceed to other tests. I mean, it's waste. It's of no use. So if this test has to be successful in order to proceed to next type of test. If this test is a failure, you cannot proceed to next type of test. How can you say that this test is a pass or failure? How can you say that this test is a pass or failure? How can you say whether this test is a pass or failure?
It should reach
Any idea?
the SLA as per the requirement.
Yeah, that's true. But at the same time, you can call this particular test as a failure or a failed test when, okay, when, first point, when the errors are more than 2 or 3%. See, you are running a load test for 1 hour, and after executing the test, if you go back and check the number of passed transactions or failed transactions, the failed transactions percentage should not be more than 2 or 3%. Okay, that's the standard. A standard is 2% only, but in some cases 3% or 5% can also be accepted. Okay, when the errors are more than 2 or 3%, that is one point. Second thing is, second thing is when there are high response times. When there are high response times. What do you mean by high response times? Our SLA is 2 seconds, right? So if you are getting some response times like 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 20 seconds, that's not something right. That means there is some bottleneck, there is some issue. Okay. At the same time, when you find some other issues, you find some other issues like application crashing, etc. So if any of these things happen, okay, as part of your performance test, then you can call it as a failure also. It's a failed test. See, straightforward, if the errors are more than 2 or 3%, it's a failed test, it's an invalid test. So if you want to say that your test is a valid load test or a successful test, your errors should be less than 2 or 3%, first thing. And at the same time, the response time should also be better. The response time should also be better. Okay, like let's say you are running these 6 transactions. Let's say one transaction you are getting a response time of 2.5 seconds or something like that. Remaining all are less than 2 seconds. That's fine. That's fine. But at the same time, the error should also be less than 2%. Then it is fine. You can say it's as a successful test mostly, not a big thing. Okay, so you have to count, you have to take it into account all these points, like to say whether a test is a pass or fail. Okay, so very, very important. So any questions with respect to load test? So load test is the first type of test that we run. Okay, so here these are the points to get clarity if our test is pass or fail. Because after executing the test, when you are sending out the report through email, in that email, some teams will clearly mention, or some performance engineers will clearly mention whether it's a pass or fail. Okay, some of them might not mention. Probably they will highlight the performance bottlenecks rather than giving a straight away answer whether it's a pass or fail. Okay, but if the test has to be valid, all these things should not happen. Okay, this is about load test. Then the next type of test is stress testing. What do you mean by stress testing? See, as the name suggests, as the name suggests, we are stressing the application beyond the beyond the expected load. See, testing the application with more number of users than the load test is nothing but a stress test. You can directly mention like this: testing the application with more number of users than load test. See, for load test, let's say in the above example, you tested with 500 users here. Okay, just for example, we have mentioned 500. Anything beyond 500 can be considered as a stress test. That means the client has told you, the client has given input as 500 users is the expected load, but you are testing something beyond that. That means you are stressing the application beyond the expected load. Okay, in that case you can refer it as stress testing. So that means you are verifying how the application is responding with more number of users than the load test. Okay, you are verifying how the application is responding with more number of users than the load test. This stress test also you can run for 1 hour, no problem. Okay, you can run for 1 hour more, no problem. So for example, here I just mention, I'm just mentioning like uh, 600, 700, 800 like users. Okay, considering above example, I mean above example in sense in the above load test example. See, in load test we ran with 500, right? 500. So here you can say like 600 users, 700 users, 800 users. Like that means we are stressing the application beyond the expected load. So this can also be run for 1 hour. Okay. Now SLA is again same thing. See, when you are stressing the application, the SLA should not change. Should not change in sense SLA can be same. That means you can relate to the same SLA. 2 seconds or 3 seconds or 4 seconds, whatever it is, as per your or as per your project. So who is going to give this input? How are we going to get this input? Okay, is there any process defined for it? Okay, should we discuss with the application team? Yes. So there is a process to gather the requirements, all the inputs, okay, which we will discuss in day after tomorrow session in detail, like how the requirements will be gathered. So if you are starting, if you started working in a performance project for the first time, how should you begin? Okay, how should you begin your work? So that's what we'll discuss on the day after tomorrow session. Okay, that means in the fourth day or something like third day or fourth day. Okay, so here again you will verify the response times. Okay, so basically you are going to verify whether the application is able to handle more number of users. Okay, so simple. What are you going to verify? Of course, response times, and then verify if application is able to handle, okay, is able to handle, okay, more number of users. So this is about stress testing. Okay, so I mean, generally, any number of users more than load test, you can count it as a stress test. That means you are stressing the application more than the expected load. Simple, in simple terms. Next type of testing is important, very important, which is called as endurance testing or soak testing or duration testing. All the terms are same. Okay, endurance or soak testing or duration, all the terms are same. In some projects they call it as endurance testing, in some projects they call it as soak testing, in some projects they call it as duration testing. Okay, so it is now this type of testing will relate to the term stability. Okay, will relate to the term stability. So it is all about checking the stability of the application. Okay, so it is all about checking the stability of the application. What is stability? What do you mean by checking the stability of the application? See, that means the application should run without any issues for longer duration. Okay, the application should run without any major issues for longer duration. Okay, as part of the endurance testing. Okay, like for example, load test is run for 1 hour, right? So here, endurance test will be run for a minimum of 3 hours, some projects 5 hours, some projects 8 hours, some projects 1 day. Okay, in 1 or 2 projects I observed 2 days, 3 days. Okay, rare case 5 days also. Okay, but most frequently the test will be run for 3 hours or 5 hours or 8 hours. Okay, this is a 99% of the projects will take this into count. Okay, will take this into count. So when you are running the performance test for the longer duration, so then you have to check how the application is responding. Is the application stable enough to handle the load for the longer duration? Okay, the application should behave similarly throughout the test. So let's say when you're running a test for 5 hours, let's say you're running for 5 hours, how the application is responding in the first 1 hour, the application should respond similarly throughout the test. For example, in the first 1 hour you are getting, in the first 1 hour, okay, you are getting 2 seconds response times. Okay, in fifth hour, let's say in fifth hour, okay, you are getting some 5 seconds or 8 seconds response times, which is incorrect. See, first 1 hour you are getting response times properly. In fifth hour you are getting 5 seconds or 8 seconds, which is way more than the SLA. No, that means there is no stability in this application. The application should respond similarly throughout the test. Response time should not degrade. The term that I use here is degrade. The response time should not degrade during the test. Okay, that's what you have to find out. The response times should not degrade. Degrade is the proper term that we have to use. Okay, now other issues that we find, see, the response time is what we monitor. At the same time, we will also monitor for other major issues, something called as memory leaks. Memory leaks or out of memory exception. Okay, OOM means out of memory exception. So what is this memory leak, how it will occur? Okay, what is this out of memory exception, how to monitor this? Okay, all these things we'll discuss in our upcoming sessions. Okay, now the major purpose of running this endurance test is to find out the stability, like how it is responding in the initial hours, how it is responding it after some time. Then the response time should not degrade. Then at the same time, we'll also look for any memory leaks or out of memory exception and all. So when these memory leaks happen or out of memory exception occurs, then the application will crash. The application might crash. Okay, there are high chances that application might crash if the memory leaks or out of memory exception appears. Okay, now one more important point is, for how much for how much of users, for how many users we will run the load test. So the load will be 75% of the 75% of the users. Okay, what we used in load test in some projects. In some projects, like I'll mention here, in some projects, load will be 75% of the users what we used in load test. For example, what we used in load test above, load test above 500 users, isn't it? So here 75% means 75% means uh, how much? 250, right? So 125, so 375. 375 users will be the target, the volumes, the load volumes for us. Say the load, generally we can say the load that we will use in some projects. But in some projects Okay, in some projects, load will be 100% of the users what we used in the load test. In that case, it will be 500 users. Okay, 500 users here as well when compared to above load test example. Got it, right? So any doubts in this endurance testing? Very, very important. Okay, any questions? Did you guys understand what is this type of testing? How we will do practically, we'll see later. Okay, definitely we'll see. It's not a big thing. But we have to understand the concept today because we are just discussing the theoretical concept of what are the different types of performance testing. Okay, very detailed notes I'm writing. So I'll share this document anyhow with you. And at the same time, I also have some slides, right? I'll share those also with you guys. Okay, so very, very important points. Okay, any questions so far? Did you guys understand the endurance testing concept? Endurance
The
test or
question
soak test or duration test? Everything is same.
I have a question.
Please.
Okay. How do you determine that you have to use 75% or 100% in this endurance test?
No, there is no proper way of determining that. That's the reason the project, the test lead or mostly the test lead or the test manager, together or including the test team will take a call either to run with 75% or with 100% of the users. So in some projects, if let's say if you are working, if you have started working in some project in which they are already following 75% of the load, so you continue to do the same. If you are given chance to run an endurance test, okay, I suggest to go with 100% of the users itself. Okay, that's what I personally I have been doing since so many years. Okay, so there is no issue whatsoever. Okay, so if I have to take a call, I'll go with 100%. That's fine. I mean, why should I reduce the number of users? Let it run with 100% load only for 3 hours or 5 hours. That's what I believe. Okay, so if you are in a project who are following 75% of the load, continue to do it. If you are given a chance or if you have to take a call, go with 100%. That's it. Okay, or there is no proper way of determining it. Like there is no methodology or something like that. Uh, it's been like that in that, but traditionally they have been following some 75% or 100% of the load. Okay. Any other questions so far? Okay. So now the next type of test will be, uh, I can say, scalability test. So if you see, uh, obviously checking this how scalable is application. How scalable is your application? Is okay. How scalable is your application? So the term scalability relates to this particular type of test. Okay, mostly uh, what happens is the client will tell you that the client will tell you that uh, the client will tell you that uh, see today my application expected load is 500 users, but my application expected load is 500 users. I'm assuming that in near future, maybe after 6 months, the load can increase by 100% or 50%. Okay, so considering that future growth, now itself you can run a load test with the future expected growth. Okay, like whatever the client is mentioning, like 50% or 100%, 50% or 100%. Okay, you can take it into account as per the client input and you can run. For example, load test load test we ran with 500 users. Okay, So client is saying that the future growth assumption is 50% users. Okay, that means number of users can be increased by 50% in near future is what the client is saying. So now itself you have to run a scalability test. You can run a scalability test, okay, to check like with how many users, what is 50% of 500? 250. So 500 to plus 250, 750 users. Okay, we have to run a scalability test with 750 users to verify the application behavior. Okay, I mean how the infrastructure is supporting, okay, how the hardware is supporting. It's not only more about the application code and all those things, but it's also about the how the infrastructure is supporting, how the servers are responding and all those things. See, for example, recently what happened, we all know we all know the recent pandemic, right? So in that pandemic, uh, there was one ad hoc requirement. I mean, in 2020, in the month of July or August, I guess, or July or August or September, sometime then. I was working for some project. The client called us and said that due to the ongoing pandemic or ongoing issues, it was a banking application. So the client called and said that due to the ongoing pandemic issues, the banking users are not able to directly walk to the bank, because anyways banks are closed. Banks were closed at that point of time. So the users were accessing the bank application. The users were accessing the bank application. Okay. Now in normal times, let's say the users are 100 or 200, but due to pandemic, no one was going to bank, right? Everyone were trying to access the online application. So the number of users increased drastically. So the client called us and said that according to the current trend at that point of time, the client said that in next 3 months, okay, the users will be increased to by 400%. By 400% is what the client requirement, like is what the client told to us. Okay, so now now they asked us to check when with the 400% load, is our application servers, or if is our application hardware will be able to withstand or not? Will the application servers or hardware be able to withstand the amount of load or not, is what we have to check. So what we did at that point of time, first we should not directly run 400% load test. What do you mean by 400%? See, 100% load test means the number of users that you used for load test, that is 500. That is 500 users. This is 100% load test. That means the number of users you used for load testing. Okay, so when the client said the users will be increased, okay, the users will be increased, okay, by 400%. That means you should not directly run you should not directly run 400% load test. That is not the right approach. So first you have to run a 100% load test with 500 users. If that is successful, then go to 200% load test. Go to 200% load test with 1000 users, because what is 200%? Double the load. What is double of 500,000? So that's what it is. Then if that is also successful, go for 300% load test. That means 1500 users. And if that is also successful, then go for 400% load test. Then that is 2000 users. Okay, so we had to tell to client whether the application handled 100%, 200, 300, 400, and what are the issues we faced here. Okay, some applications successfully handled 400% load at that point of time. Some applications were crashing at 300%. So when 1500 users were let's say when 1500 users or 300% of the load was tested, the application was crashing. So when the application crashes here at 300%, what is the purpose or what is the use of running with 400%? There is no purpose, right? When it is not successful at 300%, there is no point in running 400%. That's the reason we should not directly run 400%. Okay, and if you run 400% and it fails, you cannot determine how many users it can support. If it is failing at 400%, will it support 100, 200, 300? We cannot determine. That's the reason you have to go sequentially. Okay, not only in that example, everywhere this is the right approach. Okay, now you now in generally in your projects, what happens if you are following, if you're running a scalability test, basically they call it as a 100% load test or a 200% load test. So what we do is, okay, in most of the projects what we did is, as part of the scalability test, we run 100% and 200% by default. That means along with the load test, endurance test, we also run a scalability test for 100% and 200% by default. Okay, so that we can assure client that, okay, your application will be able to withstand the 200% of the load also. With the current infrastructure, with the current hardware, or with the current configuration you have, the application will be able to withstand a 200% of the load also. Then the client will need not be worry. The client need not worry. The client can be happily relax. Okay, my application will be able to handle to double the load also. That's fine, because sometimes the load will be increased, okay, for unknown reasons, right, in real time. So if your application is able to handle double the load, that will be much better, right? So this is about the scalability test. Some kind of requirement will come considering the future growth or near some ad hoc requirement. Okay, how the application servers might respond, how the infrastructure might respond, and all. You have to go for a scalability test. So what did now you can ask me? So when it is failing at 300%, what did you do? So when it is failing at 300%, for because it has to be addressed on priority. So the very first thing that they do is increase the capacity of the servers. What they do is increase the capacity of the servers. Let's say if it's a 8 GB RAM, so they can increase to 16 GB. Okay, like that they can increase the processors. So they can do whatever they can from the hardware perspective, so that this 300% load test will also be successful. Okay, so that's why we call it as a scalability test. Okay, now the last type of test for today that we'll be discussing is volume test. Okay, so volume test is similar to load test only. Okay, so you can, if someone is asking you what is a volume test, you can say volume test is same as load test, except that there will be a huge difference, or there will be a difference with respect to the data in the database. I'll tell you the example. Volume test is same as load test, but the difference will be only in terms of ignore the spelling mistakes, in terms of data in the database. Okay, data in the database. So I assume that you know what is a database. A database is nothing but um, uh, you know it stores all the data related to the application. For example, if it's a college, okay, or a university, so all the students data, professors data, administration data, everything should be stored somewhere. So where they'll store? In a database, right? So database is a container or a storage space for all the information related to the application. Okay, now here I'm saying that volume test is same as load test, but the difference will be only in terms of data in the database. So how is that possible? How can we run this test? Is, let's see. So the volume that we are going to use is same. That means the load that we are going to use is same. So that means we are going to use the same 500 users, okay, as load test. Okay, we will run for 1 hour only. We'll run for 1 hour only, but the amount of data in the database will be different. So here, why it will be different is again considering the future growth only. Again considering the future growth. Okay, now client says that now my application uh, is having 1 lakh records in database. Okay, let's say currently application has 1 lakh records, 1 lakh records in database. Okay, maybe after 2 years it can have 4 lakh records, 4 lakh records. Okay, now when the database has 4 lakh records in the database, when I run a load test with 500 users, how the application is responding, that is what we have to test. See, for example, take the college or university example again. So let's say the college is started recently. This is the first year, the first batch joined. So let's say like 1,000 people got registered in the first year. Okay, and now the college database has some information related to some 2,000 people, or it has some 2,000 records, including the information related to students, professors, admin, and so on. Now, after 10 years, the college will grow, definitely grow, the university will grow, and there might be some 20,000 or 30,000 students, let's say. That means the information related to all those 20,000 students or 30,000 students should be stored in the database. That means the database volume is growing rapidly. The database is containing so many records when compared to the current number. Now, when the database is having so many records, okay, how the application is responding, how your college website is responding. Okay, you want to search, you want to get the employee ID of a student, or you want to search a student. Okay, when you have 1 lakh records, how fast it is fetching the student data? When you have 4 lakh records in the database, how fast it is fetching the data, student data? That is important. So mostly it will analyze the backend SQL queries. Okay, mostly you guys might know the SQL queries, right? In our college days, we have learned, right, something like if you want to retrieve a record from database, we write something like this: select star from student, okay, where ID equal to 500, something like this. So these sort of queries will be run in the backend to fetch data from database, right? So when the number of records are huge in the database, how these queries are running? Okay, does the query performance impacted when the number of records increased in the database or not? Is what we check mostly in this type of test. Okay, so it's all about handling the database. It's all about checking the performance of the SQL queries, which will in turn fetch the data from the database. Okay, so but overall concept is more or less similar to load test, because the volume is same, the load is same, the number the hour the time duration is same. The what do you verify here? Again, the response times only, same thing, but only difference is the amount of data you have in the database will be more. So today you might have 1 lakh records. So what you do? Okay, now you guys might ask me, sir, how can we test this? So you have to work with DBA, database administrator or development team. Okay, so you have to request them, you have to, as a performance engineer, you request them to add huge amount of data, like it could be 2 lakh or 3 lakh records, like some lakhs of records, okay, into database, okay, because you cannot insert that much amount of data in the database, right? Because generally a performance engineer won't have access to the databases. Okay, so either database administrator or the development team can assist you in inserting huge amount of data or lakhs of records into database. Then once the data is inserted, then only you have to test. Without inserting huge amount of data, if you go for a load test, that is not considered as a volume test. So the volume should be there. Basically, the records, the huge number of records should be there in the database. So you have to insert that with the help of DBA or development team. Once you do that, then go ahead and run the load test with 500 users for 1 hour and check for the response times. And definitely you will see something or the other with respect to queries. Now you might ask, where can I see this? So that's the reason the APM tools will come into picture, the application monitoring tools. So in that we can analyze like which methods are running slow, which queries are running slow, all those things. Okay, so these are the 5 different types of tests that we discussed today. Okay, so tomorrow we will be discussing about this important, again this is also important, which is called as failover test. Okay, so there is some dependency with some of the terms which we haven't discussed. So tomorrow first we'll discuss those terms, like what is a web server, what is architecture, what is a web server, what is application server, what is a database server. Okay, and then how to perform failover test. Okay, we'll try to understand tomorrow. So any questions so far? Did you guys understand the differences between these? Okay, the important ones are load test, endurance test. These two are very, very important. Every project will run these two for sure.
Hello.
Yeah, tell me.
Yeah, sir, I have one question. So, when you increase the percentage of load in scalability testing, it would be same as a stress testing, right?
Yes, yes, kind of. But sometimes
Hmm.
what happens is, here we are specific. Here we are specifically taking the input from the client, like what could be the future growth. First thing. Okay, stress testing is anything beyond load test, like 500, 600, and in
Hmm.
fact, you can also, I mean, in fact, you can also test to an extent where the application crashes also. Okay,
Right.
you
Hmm.
can go and test to an extent where the application crashes. So you can keep on stressing the application until it crashes. Okay, see, you take an example of a restaurant. Let's say the restaurant has uh, some 5 tables. Currently there are 5 tables, and there is one helper, okay, who is taking the order from the customers and then delivering the food to them. Now the owner of the restaurant, got to know that the customers are increasing. Now the owner increased the number of tables to from 5 to 7. Now the helper there is now managing 7 tables. Okay, now he is able to take the order from all the customers and delivering the food, let's say in 20 minutes, to all the tables. Now again, due to increase in demand, the owner increased the tables from 7 to 9. So now the helper is again handling all those 9 tables, but instead of delivering the food in 20 minutes, now he is taking some 40 minutes because the tables increased. Okay, so now again there is a huge demand. The owner increased the number of tables from 9 to 11. Now the helper said, I cannot do it. Oh no, he left from there. Okay, he said, no, I cannot do it, I'm going. So that means the max he could manage was only 9 tables, and that too there was some performance degradation. He couldn't deliver the food in 20 minutes, right? So we can go and test to an extent, okay, until we find an issue. Okay, that is also fine, but it again depends on the input from the client. So whatever we do in the performance testing, that should be coming from the requirement should be coming from the client. Okay, so mostly
Okay.
client will not tell you to break it directly. So the client will tell you to do the scalability test with double the number of users, okay, or triple the number of users, and check and let me know. So that's what the client can tell you. 90% of the times the client will not tell you to go and test the test to an extent until it breaks, mostly, I mean, okay. So if it is, if the client is saying like that, that's fine, you can go ahead and test, that should not be an issue. But anything little bit more than load test is also a stress only. But the scalability is something which comes considering the future growth, and if the number of users are doubled or tripled or something like that, is the application hardware or the servers able to withstand or not, is what we have to verify.
Okay, yeah, got it. Thank you.
I have a question here, please.
Yeah, tell me.
Yeah, so what would you say about spike testing? That is question number one. And question number two, you talked about APM tool. So for SQL monitoring, for us to monitor the query from the database, are we instrumenting the APM tool into the database for monitoring? These are the two questions, please.
Okay.
Question number
So
one, what are
first,
we going to
yeah,
talk? Yeah, what,
yeah,
what
yeah,
are we going to talk about spike testing?
yeah.
And from
So
there,
yeah, there is also other type of testing, also spike testing. That's fine. So basically, spike testing, in spike testing, what we test is, we test to a sudden sudden or extreme increase or decrease in the load. For example, you started with 100 users, suddenly you are increasing to 300 or 400, and then suddenly you are bringing it down, or let's say suddenly you are doubling it and suddenly you are bringing it down in 2 minutes or 3 minutes, like you are not even waiting for 1 hour. Okay, so you started the test, okay, after 2 minutes you are bringing it down completely, okay, something like that. Again you are increasing, again you are decreasing, something like that. So if there is a sudden increase or decrease in terms of volumes, that is called as spike testing. So that is not a general, that is not a common type of testing that we perform. It is a type of test that we perform based on ad hoc request, specifically if it is coming from client. Okay, it's not a regular release testing kind of thing. Okay, so it is basically to determine the behavior of the application when it is receiving huge number of traffic or extreme traffic, or traffic in sense, the sudden variations, like increase decrease, like we see the cardio machine, right? The ECG cardio machine, the spike goes up and down, right? Something like that. But again, as I said, it is not something which we do as part of our every release testing. Okay, again it has to come from the client with an ad hoc request. It is again a very rare type of testing. Okay, so some projects they run, but not frequently, again depending on the input only. Okay, so that is about spike testing. The other question what you asked uh, is with respect to volume testing. So here the question you asked is, are we going to integrate the APM tool to database? Is that your question, to verify the SQL queries?
correct, correct.
No. The answer is no. The APM tool, for example, AppDynamics, will be configured in the application server. Okay, so for example, this is the application server. Okay, because I didn't tell you the what is application server yet. Okay, the other guys, you can skip this because I didn't tell you the what is application server yet. But just I'm answering to the question what you asked just now. So this is application server. So APM tool like AppDynamics, especially, it has one component called AppDynamics agent. So that agent will be configured or resided in this application server. Okay, so this is AppD agent. So it's kind of a spy here. Okay, so what it does is, whatever the activity happening in the application server will be recorded by the AppD agent. Everything it will record. Whatever the activity that application server performs, it will record. Now the application server generally when you are performing the volume test, all the requests will initially come to application server, and then the request will further go to database server. So database server. So here the app server is sending the request to database server and again getting back the data from DB server. So that means here the communication is happening, and then this AppD agent is capturing everything that is happening in app server, sending data, receiving data, how much time it has taken to get the data back, everything it will take, how many calls it has sent, how many responses it got, how much time it has taken, okay, how many are slower, how many are normal, everything will be tracked by AppD agent, okay, and then it will store somewhere in the database. And again, that's a different concept. So when I explain you APM tool, I'll explain you the AppDynamics architecture and all those things. But to answer your question, directly the AppD agent will not be interacting with DB. AppD agent will be resided in the application server. That application server will interact with DB, okay, and this AppD agent will capture everything residing in the application server itself, okay. So the queries, methods, whatever it is, okay, so it will be captured by the AppD agent. So the response times, how much time it is taking, okay, all those things. So hope I answered that question for you.
Sure. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so tomorrow when I explain you the web server, application server, database server, you'll get more clarity, like how the data will flow from client to a web server to application server to database server, okay, and then what is scale up, what is scale down, okay, what is protocol, okay, what is failover testing. All these concepts, important concepts, we'll discuss tomorrow, okay. So I'm going to save this document and send it to you, okay. So please go through, if you want, and get back to me if you have any questions, okay. So what are the slides I have, right? I will share those slides also with you guys, once the registrations all of them
Hello.
are done. Yeah, tell me.
I just have one question. The spike test and scalability test both are same, right?
No, spike testing is in spike testing we are increasing the
Increasing and
users,
decreasing. Yeah. Okay.
within short span of time,
Okay.
like after 2 minutes or 3 minutes. But in scalability test, we are just doubling the users, okay.
Okay.
That means we are increasing the users and we are running for 1 hour. That's it. There is no sudden increase or decrease in between.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
For the benefit of
Yeah,
others, is it okay you can add spike test among the type of testing and actually give brief details, brief explanation just for others to get benefit or to benefit out
sure,
of
sure.
it? Okay,
I'll
yeah,
just add couple of points on that here. Yeah.
correct. Yeah.
Okay. So here it is spike testing is performed to determine, okay, to determine the behavior of the application, okay, to determine the behavior of the application, okay, when when it you can say when it receives a sudden extreme extreme requests, or requests, you can say, or you can say traffic also. So sudden variations, or you can say sudden variations also, sudden variations in traffic. So that means sudden increase of users, and then immediately, okay, a sudden decrease in terms of users. So generally what happens is, uh, you as per the performance testing standard, um, you cannot directly put the entire load on the application, okay, like at a time. So gradually it can increase. If you are putting the entire load at a time, so it will be challenging for the application, infrastructure setup and all those things, and in fact development team also, to handle that load. So these things we might observe, especially when there is some big sale happening, let's say, let's say 12 o'clock, they announce some sale. So what happens? 12 o'clock, most of the people will be ready. Now, let's say one mobile phone is releasing at 12 a.m. In some website like Amazon or something. So what happens? People will sit in front of that at 12 a.m. and they will try to browse that. That means there will be a huge spike at 12 a.m. and then that offer will be valid for, let's say, 3 minutes. And after 3 minutes, there will be a sudden decrease in terms of number of users because the offer is expired. So in those sort of cases, okay, uh, you can see these sort of issues like sudden increase, sudden decrease, okay, something like that. But generally, it is performed to determine the behavior of the application when it receives sudden variations in traffic, like extreme increase in the load or sudden decrease in the load or something like that. This is not a frequent type of test that we do. This we will do only if there is a requirement from client. Otherwise, we will not do it. Okay. So this is about spike testing. So we will create these scenarios in controller. Okay, when we complete the scripting, when we move to controller, we will create these scenarios in controller, like how to create these scenarios, different types of tests, how to create these type of tests in controller. Okay, so we'll see that practically in the controller session. So now I'm going to save this and send it back to you. So if you have any further questions, right, so please do reach out to me on WhatsApp. So yesterday I pinged you, right? So I have the same number. You guys can reach out to me, or you can ping directly in the WhatsApp group. Anything is fine. So let me stop recording here. It's 9:10. Okay, let me stop recording here.